Welcome back, America. A decade ago or so, the Freedom Caucus started in Congress, and boy, did it disrupt Congress. It began to demand accountability for spending and shrinking government and regulatory reform, and it paved the way for the Trump 2.0 revolution that we're now going through now. Now, that spawned a whole movement in the states, and quite frankly, the state Freedom Caucuses are really turning up, so a lot quicker and with greater effect. Joining us now, the president of the State Freedom Caucus Network, Andy Roth, to tell us about it. Andy, great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, John.
All right. I know people get frustrated because change in Washington is measured in inches, but in the states, it's being measured in miles. Big changes from tax reform to shrinking government, doges at the state level that are probably even more effective than the federal doge. Tell us what the Freedom Caucuses have done.
Well, let's step back a little bit. A lot of people don't know that the Freedom Caucus is just it is the most powerful conservative caucus in the U.S. Congress. But like you said, it's expanding into the states. And what do I mean by that? Ron DeSantis, former House Freedom Caucus founder, is now arguably the most conservative governor of the United States. Raul Labrador, former member, is the Attorney General in Idaho. And now this election cycle, we have House Freedom Caucus members Andy Biggs and Ralph Norman running for governor in Arizona and South Carolina. What's amazing about that is that the group I run, the State Freedom Caucus Network, we're creating state freedom caucuses in the 50 state capitals. We've got 13 of them so far. And the reason I bring up Andy Biggs and Ralph Norman is that we've got an Arizona Freedom Caucus and we've got a South Carolina Freedom Caucus. If those two gentlemen win, and I believe that they're very heavy favorites to win their party's nomination, you now have a Freedom Caucus governor and a state freedom caucus working in the legislature, the state legislature, and amazing things will then happen. You'll be able to doge the agencies, you'll be able to cut taxes, you'll be able to shrink the size and scope of government. So those two states we're really excited about. But like I said, we're in 13 other states like Wyoming, Illinois of all places, Maryland, another blue state, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Montana, Louisiana, on and on. And our goal is to eventually get into all 50 states. Places like New Jersey and California are going to take some time, but they do have conservatives in those states and they need representation. So we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, big deal.
Andy, I talked about this at the top of the show, this dynamic that we are seeing with the Democrat Party, where especially with candidates like Zohran Mamdani, it looks like they are running far to the left. On the other hand, you have Republicans who, it seems like, especially with issues like taxation, particularly property theft, or a little bit of faux pas there, property taxes, that conservatives are returning to the Constitution. When it comes to these types of ideas spreading, even in states like you mentioned, like California, do you think that those states look at red states where, like Florida, where conditions are improving, let's say, and they maybe would be a little bit more open-minded to those policies in their own?
Well, that may be a step too far because I think the blue states really do want to bleed their taxpayers dry. California is trying to put a wealth tax on their ballot for next year, and that's going to just drive migration out of there. Californians are going to go to Texas and Florida. So to think that California is going to change their stripes is I think, a little far-fetched, at least in the short term. But once all of those wealthy people leave those blue states and come to the red states, I think it's a signal, obviously, that the red states are better. That being said, I do want to make a point, and this is the most profound point I can possibly make. No matter how corrupt you think D.C. is, the 50 state capitals are even worse. And people don't believe me when I say that. But the reason why is because when you turn on your TV or when you turn on your phone, most of the things that you see are President Trump, Kamala Harris, the Democrats in Congress, the war in Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East, the Federal Reserve and inflation. Most people don't know what's going on in their state capital. And the 50 swamps in those 50 state capitals, they like it that way. They like operating in the dark. And what happens is you have Democrats and liberal Republicans conspiring together, even in the red states, to grow government. And so what our state freedom caucuses are doing is exposing all of that. And one of the places that we've been most successful is in Wyoming, We only had 8 members of the Wyoming Freedom Caucus when they launched just 2 years ago. But because they sounded the alarm, they became a household name to all voters in Wyoming. They are now in charge of the Wyoming State House. The Speaker is a Wyoming Freedom Caucus member. The Pro Temp is a Freedom Caucus member. All of the chairs of the powerful committees are Freedom Caucus members. So we have the blueprint. We know, we've cracked the code. We know how to do this. We know how to save our states. We just have to replicate it in all the other ones.
Freedom is contagious. Real quickly, Andy, we only got about 30 seconds left. What's the big idea floating around the states that hasn't come to Washington, but one day will?
Well, I think we've got to solve the redistricting problem. Our Missouri Freedom Caucus they were the only Republicans in the state legislature that wanted to do redistricting. The swamp there didn't want to do it, but because the Missouri Freedom Caucus and President Trump worked together, they were able to deliver that. And now we just got to do it in the other states.
Yeah, I bet you're right. That's going to be a big move. We're seeing it more and more in every state around the country. Andy Roth, president of the State Freedom Caucus Network. Great to have you on. We'll be sure to get you back on real soon again. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, great conversation. All right, folks, after the break, law professor William Jacobson always brings some big ideas. And with lawfare, we're learning so much about it. We're going to tackle that next with right after the commercial break.